She thinks I don't know. She thinks I'm still the trusting fool who kissed her goodbye at the door, wished her luck, and went back to an empty house to wait like a good husband. But 3 nights from now, I'll be standing in a hotel hallway in the dark, holding a key card to the room right next to hers, listening through a wall thin enough to carry secrets. And what I hear on the other side of that wall is going to change everything I thought I knew about the woman I married, and the man I once called my brother. It started with a feeling I couldn't shake, the kind of dread that sits in your chest at 3 a.m. and refuses to leave. Sarah had been distant for months, her phone always face down, her voice careful whenever I asked about her schedule. Then came the announcement, an extended work trip, 3 days out of state, nothing special, she said, avoiding my eyes just a half-second too long. I smiled. I told her to have fun. But inside, something cold and sharp had already taken root, whispering that this trip was not what she claimed it to be. I found the hotel confirmation buried in our shared cloud account 3 days before she left. A reservation for 2 nights, under her name, at a hotel 2 states away. My hands shook as I read it. I didn't say a word to her. Instead, I quietly booked the room right beside hers, packed a bag, told my boss I needed personal time, and drove 4 hours through the night with my heart hammering against my ribs the entire way. I needed to know. I needed to see it. And some terrified part of me needed to be wrong. The hotel lobby was too bright, too calm, considering what I was about to do. I checked in a full day early, dropped my bag on the bed, and sat by the window facing the parking lot, watching every car that pulled in like it might be the one that shattered my life. Hours passed. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, landed safe, love you, and I stared at those words until they blurred, wondering how someone could type them while already halfway into a lie. I didn't answer. I just kept watching. She arrived the next evening exactly on schedule, stepping out of her car with her hair down the way she only wore it when she wanted to look beautiful for someone who wasn't me. My stomach dropped. I pressed myself against the window, watching her laugh into her phone, light and easy, a version of her I hadn't seen directed at me in years. I told myself to stay calm, to wait, to gather proof before I let anything else take over. But my hands were already trembling, and the fear in my chest had turned into something colder, dread. Night fell, and around 9 o'clock I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. 2 sets, moving slow, deliberate. A man's voice followed, low and muffled through the wall, and something about it made the hair on my arm stand up before I could even place why. I pressed my ear to the shared wall, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. I heard her laugh, soft, intimate, a sound she hadn't given me in years. And then I heard him laugh back, and the world tilted sideways beneath me. I knew that laugh. I'd heard it at backyard barbecues, at Thanksgiving dinners, across countless nights at my own kitchen table. It wasn't a stranger's voice bleeding through that wall. It was someone who had sat beside me for years, someone who had hugged me at my own wedding and called himself my brother. My fear turned to nausea, then to a numb, ringing silence in my ears. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, listening to my own family unravel one muffled word at a time, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. I needed to be certain before I let myself break. So I stayed still through the night, gripping the sheets, listening to sounds I wish I could unhear. Near midnight, the voices quieted, and I heard her door creak open, then shut with careful softness. Someone slipping out, trying not to be seen. I looked through my peephole just in time to catch a shadow disappearing around the corner, quick and practiced, like he'd done this before. That single detail terrified me more than anything else that night. The practice in it, the ease of the lie. The next morning, shaking, I slid a small voice recorder beneath the connecting door, angled toward her side of the room. I told myself it was for proof, for clarity, but really, I needed to hear the truth in words, not just guess at it through plaster and paint. That afternoon, they returned together, laughing about something trivial, and then I heard her say his name, clear and warm. David. My own brother. The room spun. The betrayal wasn't just against our marriage anymore. It reached backward through every family dinner, every holiday, every year I called him mine. I sat on the floor of that hotel room for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling like a stranger had stepped into my own life and rearranged every piece of it. I wanted to kick down that door and scream every word building in my throat, but rage without proof is just noise, and I needed more than noise. I needed something undeniable. So for the rest of the trip, I documented everything in silence. Photos of them together, timestamps, recordings, every quiet piece of a life they thought no one would ever discover. On the final night, I finally knocked on her door. When she opened it and saw me standing there, all the color drained from her face in an instant. "You said you had a conference," I said quietly, and behind her, David went rigid, his eyes wide with a kind of guilt no apology could ever erase. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I know everything," and let the silence between us do more damage than any scream ever could. For the first time all week, I wasn't afraid anymore. What followed wasn't chaos. It was a strange, heavy stillness, the kind that settles after a storm has already destroyed everything worth destroying. Sarah stammered excuses about loneliness and distance. David said nothing, staring at the floor like a man who already knew there was nothing left to say. I placed the recorder on the table between us and said, "This isn't a conversation. This is a goodbye." Then I turned and walked out, leaving them both standing in the wreckage of something they thought they'd hidden well enough to survive. I drove home alone, replaying every muffled word from that thin hotel wall, understanding now that the fear I felt walking in was nothing compared to the truth I carried out. Divorce came fast. Family gatherings after were slower, colder, full of whispered choosing of sides. But I never once regretted booking that room next door, because sometimes fear isn't your enemy. It's the only thing honest enough to lead you straight to the truth, however much it costs you to finally hear it.